the 10 bridesmaids, 5 foolish and 5 wise. In my experience, if you have 10 people and 5 are foolish and 5 are wise, well, 50-50 ain't bad. But this story is one of those that leaves us a little bit on edge. It's one of Jesus' parables that takes us to this place that we're not entirely comfortable with. After all, those 5 wise bridesmaids seem awfully rude, mean even. They mean you're not going to share your oil. Isn't that the cornerstone of everything we believe, the sharing? Since kindergarten, we are told to share. That's one of those big things. You've got to share what you have. If you have 2 coats and the other guy needs one, give him your coat, give him your shirt. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? For those of you who are in my Wednesday Bible study, we just finished the book of Acts. And toward the beginning of that, as the church is trying to figure out who it is and how it's supposed to be, you had this situation where everyone had held all of their possessions in common. They were early communists, these Christians. And people would sell what they had and give all of their money to the church, to the disciples, and they would distribute from that fund whatever someone needed. In fact, it tells that story of one such fellow who sells a piece of land and gives the money, and it's used. Then the next guy comes along with his wife, Ananias and Sapphira. And Ananias and Sapphira sell a piece of land they own, and then they say to each other, you know what? It's probably prudent of us to keep a little bit to the side just in case. And when they present part of the money to the disciples, Ananias first, the disciples say, is that all of the money that you're giving us from the land? And Ananias said, oh, absolutely it is. And he dies right on the spot. And they drag him off to bury him, and then Sapphira comes in the room. We just had a really nice talk with your husband. Is this all the money that you got from the sale? Oh, absolutely it is. Well, do you hear those footsteps? Those are the guys coming back from burying your husband in the yard, and they're going to bury you too, and she dies on the spot. And then contributions to stewardship skyrocket. Well, it's not about money, of course, this story. But we have another one, don't we? We have the feeding of the 5,000. Some kid shares his lunch, and all of a sudden, everyone is fed with leftovers to spare. Of course, it's not about loaves and fishes either. This story is about oil. And in 1 Maccabees, we have the Hanukkah story where just this little tiny bit of oil that shouldn't have lasted an hour lasts all night. So we have a miracle with oil. Come on, God, you know you can make oil last. You've got that ability. What's with these bridesmaids keeping their oil from the foolish ones? That's what they do. They say, we can't give you our oil. There won't be enough left over for you and for us. You better go and buy some oil. The all-night oil salesman down the road. And as the story goes, by the time they get back, it's too late. And the last line of the gospel is, keep awake, therefore, for you know not the day nor the hour. But it's not about keeping awake either, because if you read the parable, both the foolish and the wise bridesmaids all fall asleep during that parable. It's the yelling, look, here he comes, that wakes them all up, and then they start trimming their lamps. And then some have enough oil because they brought it, and some don't. So what do we do with these mean people with their oil, keeping them to themselves? Of course, maybe it's not about oil either. What if it's about something that you can't share? Something that you can't share. We talk about everything as if it's something you can share, but there are some things that you can't. Now go with me here for a moment. When I did a lot of camping as a Boy Scout as a child, you get all snug and cozy in that sleeping bag. on those cold nights, and you don't want to open the tent because it's cold. You don't want to get out of the sleeping bag, but then you have to go to the bathroom. Eventually, someone in your tent gives up and says, all right, I'm going. And there was a tradition in my scout troop that said, would you go for me too? It doesn't work that way. Or if you studied all night for a test and your friend didn't, they can't say, would you study for me too? When the test comes, you can't share your knowledge. It's not going to work. There are all sorts of things that are like that. Prepare for me, will you? Know something for me. Study for me. Commit to this thing or that thing for me on my behalf. Would you understand this for me? Will you exercise for me, please? But you can't. It's your muscles. You can't have someone else exercise for you. It just doesn't work. I've asked my wife and it does not work. What about hope for me? You have to hope for yourselves. You can spread hope, you can spread the reasons for hope, but at the end of the day, the hope is your own. Trust. You can't have someone else trust for you, whether it's another person or whether it's God. We have in the book of Joshua this wonderful phrase, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You can't do that for someone else. You can't have someone else do that for you. It also says, incline your hearts toward God. That's something you have to do yourself as well. Later on in the service, we will say, we lift up our hearts to the Lord. Very similar to incline your hearts toward God. You can't have someone else do it for you. Or the really big one, I think. You can't be loved for someone else. God loves us in a way that makes love too small of a word. And you have to accept that love. It's hard for us, I think, sometimes to accept love. To know that we are the beloved. You know the beginning of the wedding service, dearly beloved, we are gathered here. We ain't talking to the couple. We're talking to them and everyone else. That's you all, the beloved. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it. I really wish we had the ability to add one more line to the confession this morning. In that confession that we all read, we say that we confess to God that we have not loved God as much as we should, that we have not loved our neighbors as ourselves. I would love to add, we have not allowed ourselves to be loved. You have to accept that yourself. Twice a year, the Diocese of Virginia has a clergy conference, and this fall one that we just came back from a couple of weeks ago had Martin Smith, an author, an English priest, and a bit of a modern mystic. He told this wonderful story. When he was seeing his confessor just before his own ordination many years ago, the confessor asked him the question, Martin, how long have you been waiting to be a priest? And Martin said, since I was 5 years old. And the confessor replied, that's nothing. God has been waiting for you to be a priest for 4 million years, waiting on the edge of his seat to see what you were going to do with that love. God has been waiting for 4 million years or so for all of you to be loved, to love you and to be loved in return. God's been waiting all that long on the edge of his seat to see what you are going to do with the fact that you are beloved and the gifts that God gave you to show that to the world. It is hard to accept sometimes. In the service this morning of the Eucharist, we will have this wonderful words that says, Jesus yearned to draw all the world to himself. That's you all. And you can't have someone else be drawn to Christ for you. He yearned to draw all the world, you, to himself. Unlike the oil that night, the love of God is abundant. But I can't be loved for you. And you can't be loved for me. So what does it mean when we say we do share the love of God? It means we pass it on. We pass it on. I can't be loved for you, you can't be loved for me, but we pass it on. The psalm does a wonderful job of explaining this. That unbroken line of one person leading the next to this love of God. That which we have heard and known, and what our forefathers have told us, we will not hide from our children. We will recount to generations to come the praiseworthy deeds and the power of the Lord and the wonderful works he has done, that generations to come might know, and their children yet unborn, that they, in their turn, might tell it to their children, so that they might put their trust in God and not forget the deeds of God, but keep his commandments. You are the beloved. Know that, accept that, share it if you can, but at the end, only you can be beloved of God for you.